Normally, for a legal adoption, you pay at most for a passport, an airplane ticket, and you certainly don't pay between $50,000 and $70,000 to have a baby.
So you've seen bills for $50,000? Yes. And when you saw that, you immediately thought that you were...
Word of death, don't believe that we bought you. And then I thought, actually, yes. Yes, in fact, they did buy a baby in Lebanon during the war.
Carolyn? Hello, Paola. I hope you are doing well. I'm fine, thank you. I'm very happy to meet you today, so you can share your story with us. I know that you were an adopted child and that you only found out recently and that you were taken away from your biological family 38 years ago from your home country, Lebanon.
Exactly. I found out 3 years ago that I had indeed been adopted and that I am a victim of international child trafficking children from Lebanon during the war. I believe, because it's not at all certain, that I was adopted at the age of a few weeks, maybe a month, maybe 2 months. I only found out last year that my official birth date on my identity papers actually corresponds to the date chosen for my transfer to France. So I was born before that date, that is before October 7th, 1985. I arrived in France in early November 1985. I arrived in a French family living in Paris in a very beautiful apartment. I had a beautiful childhood, but I always felt very different from others until maybe 12, 14 years old.
And why did you feel what was different compared to the others?
The feeling when you arrive at school is indescribable. From the 6th grade, for example, you have to get up. The teacher takes attendance in the class. And every time he pronounced my name and my first name, I didn't feel comfortable. I wanted to hide. I was ashamed. I felt guilty, but I didn't know. There was no subject to know why you explained that to your parents. No, they never knew. They never knew anything. I never dared to tell them because I was afraid of no longer being tolerated. So I never really dared to ask questions. He did everything to make it omerta in fact and that it is well hidden under the
carpet. And
then it doesn't come out at all. And I felt that until I was pregnant myself. And actually, when you become a mom yourself, when you've been adopted, something else happens. And I started wanting to know, asking myself questions, and actually understanding why I felt so different, why I felt uncomfortable with everyone. I've always been...
What was your relationship like with your adoptive parents during your childhood, both your adoptive mother and father?
It was a very special relationship. I had an extraordinary dad who took great care of me, who taught me everything. And I had a mom with whom we never understood each other, who spent her life saying, when are you going to fit into the mold? When are you going to fit into the mold? I still hear this phrase from when I was very little in my head. I will never fit into her mold because she never literally carried me. Our relationship has always been conflictual and complicated. We never understood each other. We never crossed paths. I was not her child. I can't explain. The chemistry and relationship one can have with a mom was lacking.
I haven't ever known that with her. Did you feel loved by her? Did you feel like she considered you her daughter? Or was there always a barrier? There was always...
Been a pebble in the gears, yes. And I knew she loved me, but she didn't love me the way I needed. I felt a strong sense of rivalry between her and me. She and I never saw eye to eye. Our opinions were polar opposites, making me constantly uneasy in her presence. There was something, even physical actually, where I couldn't necessarily go to her, I couldn't necessarily hug her. So she never told you that you were adopted. She never explained it to you. So they told me that I had been adopted through a surrogate mother at the time. 38 years ago, surrogate mothers did not exist. They told me that I had been found in a church alcove. They told me that I had been found in the mountains in Lebanon. They told me my fairy tale for 35 years, until the day I slammed my fist on the table saying, now, you stop, you're going to tell me the truth. In fact, 12 years ago, I was pregnant with my first daughter, and I was very sick. And the surgeon at the maternity ward told me, listen, I need to know your family history to understand your illness. Explain to me. And I told them, I don't know. Ask my mom. My mom replied that she didn't know and had forgotten since it was too long ago. That was my first clue. I thought it wasn't possible to forget being pregnant and giving birth. And then similarly, to get married, you had to fill out baptism certificates. So the priest tells me, don't worry, I have time. I will go look at your baptism certificates. And then he calls me one day and he tells me, but you know, the name and first name on the baptism certificate, they are not yours. They are not the parents I know. It's not Jacques and Christelle as they are called. It's other first names, another last name. But it doesn't match. And the last name that was on the paper, it was apparently biological parents. Okay, except that in fact, he noticed that next to it, it was marked borrowed. And so Apparently, on my official papers, I would have been born to biological parents with fictitious names because they probably did not want to be found or that kind of thing. That's what I believed in.
At least at the time. When they started telling you that it was a surrogate mother, then that you were found in the mountains, then other stories like that, what were you thinking? Of me.
Vulnerably speaking, they don't care about me, literally. They must be aware of what happened. I began questioning the building's caretaker as she was there long before they moved in. I thought she might have seen me arrive and know something. And little by little, tongues started to loosen. And so she told me that my parents had told her, for example, that I came from a very young, very vulnerable mother and that she couldn't keep me, and so I was adopted. I ended up gradually gathering elements while I was pregnant with the priest. And then one day with my 2 children, we go down the 5 floors in the elevator, and then my daughters have fun saying, oh, well, I have dad's hair. Oh, well, I have the look and eyes of grandma, for example. And arrived on the ground floor, my eldest tells me, but you, Mom, honestly, you have no resemblance to your parents, to believe that they are not your parents. And it started like that.
And at that moment, you began questioning yourself. Then I agreed.
Actually, it's her who opened my eyes. And I thought to myself, but she's right. I've been led on all these years. She tells me this, and I had never talked about it in front of her. I thought to myself, actually, children have something unconsciously perceptible. And then I thought, yeah, no, actually, that's it. It's good. I want to know the truth, and I will bang my fist on the table to get it. And how did it go exactly? So I started asking my parents questions to ask them if I was indeed born in Lebanon, to start with. Because after all, I had papers. But I thought to myself, since they're telling me anything, maybe this is also nonsense. So I was indeed born in Lebanon. I was in an orphanage in the mountains of Beirut. It's them, it's your parents who gave it to you.
They told me that, and you believed it. You didn't think it was another mountain.
Well, yes, actually. And on the other hand, what was horrible is that you say to yourself, they lied to me about that. So actually, they maybe lied to me about a lot of other things in my life. And I said to myself, actually, I don't know them. It's really this impression that I had. I said to myself, but actually, my whole life is based on a swamp, a lie. And yet I tried to build myself to have a great job that I love, a husband, children. And I said to myself, actually, with all this solid base underneath, it's swampy as possible. And I said to myself, it's not possible. And you said to yourself,
I know neither my parents nor myself.
Who am I? And then actually, as I search, I come across a file that my dad ends up giving me. He ends up cracking one day, and he tells me, yes, you were adopted. Yes, we went through the Lebanon agency, and then we went through this lawyer, but don't believe that we bought you. And then that word, I remember all my life. I was driving 3 years ago with him next to me. We were on the highway. I thought I was going to have an accident. I trembled as I questioned why he used that word when it shouldn't exist. I had adopted girlfriends who told me their parents had an agreement and went through the proper channels with the DAS to do things legally. He gives me the person's name and file. I realize my first name and birth date are not my real ones, that I was born earlier, not in Beirut, but likely nearby. Everything collapses.
What do you say to yourself at that moment? What do you feel at that moment? Did you say to yourself that you've been a victim of child trafficking?
My life collapses in that moment. I question my identity and completely lose it. People jokingly say I can now celebrate my birthday however I want because the date is incorrect. In fact, the name I would have been given at birth is Linda. Linda, yeah. And actually, it's my third name on my identity papers. But there again, my parents told me, oh, well, there was a great aunt in the family who was called that, so we wanted to give that name.
So, but in reality,
it's the first name that maybe the midwives or the nurse at the time had given me at birth. And in my file, I found some invoices. And then you think, but wait, it's strange because normally for legal adoption, you pay at most for a passport, a plane ticket, maybe a tax stamp for a passport, an identity card, but you certainly don't pay
not between
$50,000 and $70,000 to have a baby. So you've seen bills at $50,000? Yes. So not at $50,000 all at once, but several small bills that add up to a total of $50,000 to $60,000. And when you saw that, you immediately thought, where did this come from? Dad's word is not going to believe that we bought you there. And then I thought, well, actually, yes, in fact, they bought a baby in Lebanon. And during the war, everything is falling apart. But what have you done? It's completely illegal. It's disgusting. You stole a baby from a woman. You prevented a woman from being a mom. You took advantage of the vulnerability of a young woman who was lost, left to herself most likely because it was war. because she probably couldn't have this baby, because it was an illegitimate relationship. She was not supposed to be married, etc. And in fact, you played with that and you took her baby from her. That day, I felt torn from someone and held a lot of resentment towards them. It's paradoxical. I resent them immensely because I think it's deeply immoral to do something like that. Yet I've had a very beautiful life. So in fact, you are in a huge loyalty conflict.
On one hand, you are grateful for the life they were able to offer you, but at the same time, you
feel betrayed, alone,
lost, not recognized. Exactly, yes. And what was your relationship with your adoptive parents from the moment you knew you had been torn from your biological mother, that you had been bought? Now, I confronted them.
I stormed into their house, very angry, telling them, look, I've discovered this, and this. So I printed out some things I found on the internet. I explained to them what I understood, what I saw, and I told them, now explain to me. What did they answer? We don't remember. It was too long ago. We don't have the details. And then I say, but stop there. That's enough. It's good. There's a time when assume your actions. And, well, I was 36, 37 years old. I told them I am myself a mother of 2 children. I am married. I am a grown up. I can understand. Explain to me. Anyway.
It's done.
We had a beautiful life. Later, they told me I had been hidden for the first 6 months of my life. Because when I arrived in France in November 1985, with my little papers, a blanket and a pajama, I was not recognized in France. And as they had made an agreement with the ADAS a year before, when I arrived in France, they called the ADAS, and there I have a letter in my file where they say, here, we have a little girl who fell from the sky. How do we regularize the situation in France? Tell us what is the procedure to do for a full adoption in France. So based on a little girl who comes out of nowhere and who arrived like that in France by the magic of the Holy Spirit. So in fact, they made this baby purchase in France pass for a legalization of my identity in France and to obtain a full adoption judgment, and therefore that I officially belong to them. And so they went as far as changing my identity papers and saying that I am their biological child on the full adoption papers. So when you look at my adoption papers, it says daughter of and of. They signed full adoption papers in France with their first and last name, making them my legal parents, even though I was born in Lebanon to different biological parents. The full adoption process took 6 months due to the time required to appear before the judge and gather necessary documents. So, as if you were born in France and they picked you up from the DAS. That's right. So, it is stated that I was born in Lebanon after all. It is stated. The date is marked as October 7th, but that's not my birthday. It says Caroline, but my name is Linda. Everything is altered and changed, nicely packaged to get past the government. Gradually, I underwent DNA testing. There were names. There were a lot of names, a lot of families. And I said to myself, but where do I start? How does it work? And so I start looking on Facebook. And 1.5 Soul, and I tell myself there, I will definitely find something by typing people's names and first names on
the DNA result, the people who had the same DNA as
you, yeah.
With whom you share DNA.
You had a lot.
100% Lebanese blood. And
that's how I discovered I was 100% Lebanese.
Your parents and your
grandchildren, they are French.
They are French, and
mom is German, and my dad has Italian origins. And there I realized that I am 100% Lebanese, and my father had told me at the time. So maybe your biological father is perhaps a soldier who came to lend a hand during the Lebanon War. So maybe you have European origins, rather from the north. And then a Lebanese mom, we don't know anything. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. He likewise makes up stories as he goes along and passes them on. And so I was very reassured to know that I was completely Lebanese. Miraculously, with these DNA tests, you can find out roughly the city of origin, or at least the region of origin. That's how I found out that I was originally from the Bekaa in Lebanon, which is actually the plain in the middle of the 2 mountain ranges, which was also a great clue. Exploring names is like searching for a needle in a haystack.
Things like that. You put whatever you want in non-user.
You put whatever you want in non-user, and so it became very complicated. And I came across an association on Facebook called the Adopted from Lebanon, with amazing people who have lived the same story as me and who actually help each other in DNA research. And there is a woman in this group who is particularly skilled on the subject, and with her we explored each name, each first name, each post, each DNA segment, relationship to me, etc. DNA doesn't lie, and the more I sought the truth, the more doors closed.
Why?
So you have to know that in 1985, the Lebanese government was Christian. And so among Christians, you can put babies up for adoption. Whereas if it had been a Muslim country where the government was Muslim, it would have been forbidden. And so there he explains to you, in fact, that since it's Christian, adoptions can take place. And it's good news because women who sinned outside of marriage were victims of honor crimes there. And so, in fact, honor crimes are when either the biological father, an uncle, a dad, a grandfather give themselves the right to kill the woman who sinned with her unborn baby. Sinned, that is to say, having a relationship outside of marriage, having a sexual relationship outside of marriage, exactly. In fact, the woman and her baby were at risk of being killed to protect the family's honor. They believed that if you killed the woman and her sin, you could save the family honor. And so this lawyer, who was an intermediary for adoptions, uses this argument saying, but we saved the lives of children, plus it's war, so we're going to save them from the war, when in fact the only reason is ultimately to satisfy the demand of infertile couples in European countries, in wealthy families, who want at all costs to have a child, and who actually use this intermediary to get what they want. In fact, you could buy a baby there just like you would buy something from another country on Amazon today. It's the same process, just as fast, like an express delivery. My parents had applied for adoption approval in France, but realized that the waiting times for a baby were very, very long, because it's extremely regulated, so it takes a lot more of. The adoption process can take 3 to 5 years due to the extended waiting periods between psychological tests, house approval, and other requirements, especially the time it takes for a baby to become available. Sometimes it's even impossible to adopt. Sometimes it's even impossible. There, they did the approval. They got their approval. They heard about this lawyer through friends who had done the same thing, but via Colombia. The friends told him to try calling the phone number. This woman, she can get you a baby. And so that's what they did. In my file, I discover a letter from August 1985 stating they have an agreement in France, but no baby. We want a baby, ideally a little girl, ideally in good health, as small as possible, with brown eyes, etc. You put the physical characteristics in the same way you order a car on the internet saying, I want such color, such seat, such thing. And she responds to them. She says, okay, the next one, baby will be for you. It's going to be so much. Quickly, after a month, we have a baby that you had just put, you were 3 days old, I don't know. I don't even know if I was delicate, and I came across a testimony of a woman who recounts the actions of this lawyer and who complains about the illegal side of adoptions via this lawyer. What does she say in the testimony? She recounts that this lawyer was arrested for international child trafficking because, in fact, in the 90s, there was a change in the government. A new person arrived. This person was convinced that the lawyer was trafficking children. They started investigating her in Lebanon and realized that it was so easy for her to get identity papers, to get a lot of things, that it wasn't normal. And while investigating, they told her, you are trafficking children, you have a nanny, she is an accomplice. And she stopped all these people. And in fact, this woman, she brags a lot about having a husband in the government. Her father was a pediatrician, so it was very easy for him to examine the babies and then to be in contact with maternity wards and find babies, in fact, quite simply. She did this with impunity, claiming she had many friends everywhere. And as she was helping Lebanese people who also wanted to have babies, in fact, as soon as she fulfilled a request, the person was very grateful to her, because when you, quote unquote, give a baby to someone, wow, it's amazing. You're forever grateful to have fulfilled someone's wish to be a mother. And so, as a result, you left for Lebanon 11 months ago. Why? Why did you say to yourself, I'm going to leave for Lebanon? I was psychologically unwell and harbored intense anger towards my parents. I was asking myself too many questions, and I was wondering, was I really a victim of this trafficking or not? Seemed to me so doubtful all the time, actually. And I told myself, but I need to know. So we went. So the moment I arrived, I wanted to turn around. I got sick right away. The airport, a disaster. I think all the emotions actually were surfacing. We walked in the streets. And my husband had said, do you want to take a taxi? I said, no, especially not. I said, we're going to soak up the smell, the landscape, the way the city is built, etc. We're going to walk, we're going to stroll through the streets and everything. I began anchoring myself right then. And there you felt a belonging, yes. I felt like my feet were anchoring into the ground. It's like walking on concrete before it has dried. I thought to myself, actually, this is my homeland. In fact, I was born there. I have a sense of belonging again. I live in France, but I know my origins. And seeing the landscape, etc., it was magnificent. And I was very lucky, because we came across a guide not very young, but it was very good. Because in fact, he was in Lebanon during the war, and so he told me a bit about what it was like during the war in Lebanon with the bombings, and he tells me, but I also helped children to leave Lebanon, and he tells me, but I really felt like I was saving these babies because you would probably have been destined for certain death. So yes, it's horrible to have snatched babies, but at the same time, it's fantastic because you've had a beautiful life that you could never have had otherwise. I told myself, but still. You explained your story, that's why he told you that. And in fact, the whole stay for a week, this tour around that, actually, on his stories, on his own story, about the war, about the bombings, about the boat, because at the time the Beirut airport was bombed. So actually, to leave Lebanon, we went in small boats hidden under blankets to Cyprus. And in Cyprus, actually, we could take a plane to a destination. He shares the complete international story of how it all unfolded. The Jounier airport was there for that. The smugglers, who obviously collected money along the way. The customs officer at the airport, who also collected some money to let women with babies pass, where you suspect the identity a bit, that kind of thing. And so with the guide in Lebanon, we went to see the lawyer.
So you knew the lawyer's name because of your research?
And my father had eventually given me the name at some point. And actually, I search on Google for the address of this lawyer with my husband. We find it. And in Lebanon, he tells me we don't go. So I was like that, but I tell him, well, listen, we are here. I was not born for nothing. We go. So the guide takes us to this lawyer. What did you feel?
Before entering it was an office, it was an apartment. How did you feel when you arrived? Very, very bad. And I knew they were going to step in.
Where they shouldn't. It's kind of forbidden.
But at the same time, you need it. It's
forbidden. I need it. She's old. She's 83 years old. She might not last 170 years. I realized it was now or never. I hoped that at her age, she might spill some information. Did you explain your story to her on the phone, or did you? No, I omitted telling her my story. I simply told her that I was one of the babies, that she had transferred to France, to Paris, and in fact, to win her sympathy and to be able to go see her, I explained to her that I had a very happy life, that it was wonderful, that thanks to her I was able to have loving parents, a beautiful life, etc. And she told me I would be delighted to see you again. And then I thought, okay, there you have a ticket, you have to go.
In fact,
we arrived at her place just as her daughter did. Her daughter sat in a corner, smoking many cigarettes and drinking a lot of coffee.
They're a bit like a dog of...
Guard her daughter. She has maybe, 45 years old, something like that. Very withdrawn, but very observant. And you actually feel observed, but not in a healthy and benevolent way. You feel that she is there in case someone might be attacked. She will pounce directly.
It's the nest of Pas if she had a rifle next to her, and then... She is very small when you see her, because I feel that you are still someone who feels a bit of the energies when you see her in the apartment. What do you feel at her place?
She emanates
something bad.
Evil embodied in her eyes, in her gaze, in her way of speaking, even her way of sitting, her way of receiving in her apartment with a lot of valuable objects. In living rooms everywhere, she anticipates questions and confrontation. Sitting before her, she remarks that I have a good life with a husband and children and questions my presence there. I asked her to explain what happened, how, why, the woman's age, and if she's still alive. She responded that if she speaks, she'll go to jail. I said, it's because you have something to blame yourself for. Otherwise, you wouldn't mention jail. She says she's already been to jail and arrested for child trafficking and won't say more to avoid going back to jail, claiming they don't know what they're talking about. In fact, she was completely closed off, but she went into the next room, returned with a file, and told me, here, this is your file. Before returning to the room, she carefully removed all the information related to the biological family. She remembered my father. She tells me, I don't remember your mom, but I remember your dad. I tell her, oh, really? But you never met him. She says, well, yes, at the airport when I put you in his arms. I tell her, well, very good. And in fact, she tells me, but there, you don't need to know anything. She tells me, all these little young girls, all these little idiots between 14 and 17 years old who do anything, who sleep with anyone, it serves them, right? I tell her that we're actually discussing women, human beings, and babies. It's not a doll, she tells me. Well, yes, but they shouldn't have done stupid things. It's too bad for her, and anyway, it's better than being killed. Yes, indeed, it's better than being killed, but still you were arrested for trafficking. You say you saved babies from war, it doesn't match up.
In fact, she says, I will not speak, I do not want to go to prison. And you who had so much, who traveled from France to go to Lebanon, who meets this woman when she closes the doors on you, when you are this close to knowing the truth? What do you feel then, Rage?
From there, you want to smash everything. I was angry, I was frustrated, I wanted to vomit. I wasn't well and was shaking. My husband felt sorry for me, but she said she works at a maternity ward called Saint Vincent de Paul. Saint Vincent de Paul was run by nuns, and I realized, in fact, on Facebook too, that a nun on her deathbed was giving out information about adopted children, and in fact, this nun, to die in peace, had decided to tell everything about the adopted children she had in her hands, and that she herself had put up for adoption like that for adoptive families. And I thought to myself, maybe at the orphanage, which is noted on my papers, maybe the nuns will also do that. My husband and I decided to visit the orphanage, also run by nuns in Beirut, where I was supposedly born. And so we go. We are welcomed by 2 nuns. It's an absolutely sublime place overlooking Beirut, with a huge cedar in the middle of a garden. It's splendid. The view is magnificent over the sea and everything. So already for me, the emotion rises at that moment a lot, because I tell myself, in fact, I transited at this place. It's sublime. And in fact, the contrast between this beautiful place and the drama of war is quite disconcerting. We arrive and they say, but we've never had a baby here. Today, the building is an orphanage that aims to protect women who are victims of violence. They asked us to leave. The guide then said to wait, as he was going to ask the Mother Superior. The Mother Superior arrives at one point and tells me she's going to inform me of something. And I say, wait, you're really going to tell me? She tells me, yes, I'm going to tell you, because I think it's important for you to know your origins and how it happened. So we go out, she tells me, see there, it was bombed. Now there's just a garden with a cedar, but actually when you were a baby, the nursery, it was here. It's silly information, but knowing that indeed you passed through there, that you were there, that she shows you the place, just that psychologically, in fact, it removes a very small part of the swamp. It puts a slightly more solid spell. She tells me, don't worry, you were very well treated. We had everything we needed because, in fact, they had partnerships precisely thanks to the bribe and this kind of things, to have milk, diapers, blankets, pajamas, little cuddly toys and stuff like that. So she tells me, don't worry, in fact, we took good care of you. And she tells me, we don't necessarily have archives, but I will check anyway. And then I will see if you were indeed in the orphanage and if I can find information on something else. And we leave like that, without believing it. A week later, back in Paris, she called me. She tells me I actually went to look. And I found you in the orphanage's archive papers. You did pass through here when you were a baby. It lasted a few days. It was just the time to do your papers, to go to France, to avoid you precisely the mistreatment and this kind of things before the lawyer comes to pick you up to leave there. I said to myself, I finally have an answer. There's finally someone who tells me something concrete that is true for once among all these thousands of lies, one after the other, etc. And she tells me, you know. September, October is indeed not your birth date. September, October is when the papers were made to get you out. However, she tells me, you were called Linda. I wonder, how does she know? It's not possible that she knows. This can't be made up. She tells me, you know, back in the day when women gave birth and we didn't know what name to give, we looked at the saint of the day, and we actually gave the child the name of the saint of the day. And she tells me St. Linda is on August 28th. So she tells me that potentially means you were born on August 28th. And then I think, well, I changed my astrological sign. I'm not myself anymore. I can celebrate my birthday on several dates. And I think, yeah, actually, that's it. I have another crucial piece of information. We walk around the ABK almost to the Syrian border, and I see within a few moments 2 billboards. And these 2 billboards were the names I had in my DNA test. And I tell her, oh, look, there's the sign. There's another sign with names from the DNA test that must be investigated. I didn't have time, but on my next trip to Lebanon, my priority is to go back there. I've always been told Lebanon is a very small country. People know each other very well. We will visit these villages. When we analyze the DNA test results based on last names and geographical origin.
Did you explain all this to your adoptive parents? All the steps you've taken? No, they don't know.
I explained part of it. I told my parents that I had gone to Lebanon, but I didn't dare tell them. I was actually afraid that they would worry. My husband told them we're going to Lebanon with Caroline next week, like ripping off a Band-Aid, as I feared they would think I wouldn't love them anymore. I told them that I had seen the lawyer, but I spun it all in a positive light. It was nice to see her again. She received us well. I sugarcoated as much as I could because I was afraid of hurting them, and I didn't want them to feel abandoned at their age. And if something happened because they are advanced in age, they would leave with a bad impression. But I didn't tell them about the DNA tests. I didn't tell them about the research. I didn't tell them everything I knew. And I was even more angry with my mom until today. But my dad and I, it brought us closer anyway. Why? What's the difference? Because he let go. He told the truth. So I think he broke the silence, and it did him good to confess because, quote unquote,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've lived your whole life in a lie. But they've lived their whole life, they've lied. It's challenging to avoid lying, as one lie often leads to another. People get entangled in their fabricated stories and start believing their own lies. It's really a vicious circle. Like, why do you think they lied to you? Because it was illegal and they were afraid that you...
It was completely illegal. You don't spend tens of thousands of dollars to have a child. Maybe they also feared arrest. Initially, my parents were afraid I would be taken away, so they didn't dare say I had arrived at their home. They hid me. I couldn't go out, and the nanny wasn't allowed to take me out, except when there were very few people around on weekends in the neighborhood. If someone called from ADAS or an unknown source, they falsely claimed that the parents were on maternity leave and not working. In reality, my mom never cared for me, took me to school or picked me up. And on the contrary, my father taught me everything. My father showed me off like a trophy. He taught me a lot of things. We shared great moments. And that's why I've always felt like I had a dad, but not a mom. She didn't speak to me for almost a year because I left the company. I resigned properly saying, I'm going to change careers. I hated what he was doing because it's a very masculine job, whereas I, in fact, have wanted to help others since I was very young. And strangely, you see, in relation to my own story, I specialized in perinatal care to help women who can't have children due to psychological blocks. So that's my job. I am a perinatal coach and also a therapist for children. And what a joy it is to unlock the minds of women so they can get pregnant. And she never understood. She couldn't bear it. Your adoptive mom, she couldn't have a child. She just couldn't. Does she know why she couldn't? Because she got pregnant and one morning she left the house. She returned in the evening after getting an illegal abortion from backstreet abortionists, as this was before the Simone Weil law legalizing abortion. The procedure left her badly injured. And so, in fact, it completely messed up her reproductive system. She could no longer have a baby, leading to an obsessive quest for one at all costs. My father confessed this to me during a discussion, as he was disconcerted when she came home one evening and said she was no longer pregnant, despite his desire to be a dad at the time. And I told him, but in fact she had her chance. She didn't want to seize it, citing professional obligations, and she went to steal the baby of another who maybe wanted to keep her baby. I shouldn't have judged her because obviously it's her body and everyone should do what they want with their body. And if you decide to have an abortion, there's no problem. And I'm for women being able to do that, and they can dispose of their body as they want, except that there I thought to myself, why did you take someone else's baby when you had your chance, actually? This question haunted me for a long time. I forbade myself to judge and let her do as she wanted, never talking to her about it or asking any questions. And I have one of my very good friends who took a long time to have a baby, whom I also accompanied a lot, and who told me, but you're ready to do anything when it's despair. And she told me herself that for a long time, for several weeks, for several months, she was forming scenarios in her head about how to get a baby if she couldn't do it naturally. Thank God she managed to have her baby naturally. Beautiful little girl said, we're ready for anything. I agreed, but added that although we're ready, we don't excuse everything.
In fact, and in relation to your self-esteem, what has changed? Is there a before, after? Yes, there is a before.
And a clear after there is the very scared little girl who always said yes to be accepted, to please, and to avoid rejection. Today I have worked a lot on my esteem and my confidence. It is also felt a lot in work. I dare to do a lot more things, a lot more projects, and especially I think I know how to say no. In fact, to respect myself and tell me, yeah, in fact, there I am anchored today. Now I can say no without fear of being loved less or rejected by others. And that I think it changes a lot of things in the relationship with my husband, with my children. Always very loving, of course, but when it's no, and it's much simpler. And I tell myself, yeah, actually, you have the right. Actually, you say no there, but it doesn't change anything. Your loved ones won't love you less, reject you, or abandon you for it. That's precisely all the work I've done on this. You feel legitimate, I feel legitimate again. 38 years later, it's very recent since I went to Lebanon. It gave me legitimacy. It established me in an identity, even if it is not yet completely known, and I don't have all the answers to my questions yet. There is still a big part that has been filled by making this trip, and I think that's good. And I'm happy about that because today I know who I am again, and the fact of discussing with you like this today. It further establishes the Lebanese side, the origins, the identity, where I tell myself, in fact, I finally dare to express openly who I am, what is me, you see, and that's very important. And I thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to do this, because it's great, and without apprehension and stress, because it's all kindness, and that's rare too, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
It was too much.
Good, this interview. Yes, I liked it too, and I hope it will help you and that you will go to the end of everything. I hope. We'll see what life brings me.